Hello, I'm Caroline CSE. Welcome to Stonewall Equestrian and the return of Thoroughbreds Are Go, where we promote the adaptability and athleticism of the thoroughbred to the equestrian world, help racing owners find their ex-racehorses great new homes, and educate those taking them on about their best care. Coming up this week, some great information about feeding thoroughbreds after they retire or move from the racing and breeding industry into a new home. We hear from the hugely energetic World Cup show jumper Chrissy Harris about what's in store for their events, which now stretch across Australia. And a great tale of thoroughbred love in Arrowfield Studs Strappers Stories. That's all coming up on the return of Thoroughbreds Are Go. One of the most important and misunderstood pieces of the thoroughbred rehoming puzzle is the way a horse will react physically to a new environment and in particular to new feed. Equine nutritionist Rebecca Ham has some great information to help rehoming your thoroughbred, including making sure their food and water requirements are up to scratch. Rebecca, you obviously have an extensive background with thoroughbreds. Tell me, a little bit about the work that you've done and what you've learned over the years about this incredible breed.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably thoroughbreds are one of my favourite horses, to be honest, and I particularly have a passion for these off-the-track horses. So very privileged to be able to work with them, and obviously working with Racing Victoria as well, so in that off-the-track program.
Well, you graduated from Charles Sturt University with a degree in equine nutrition. You taught at NMIT in Melbourne. You're now with Kentucky Equine Research. Explain some of the work you've done and some of the work you currently do with Kentucky Equine.
After graduating from CSU in 2006, I actually knew that I wanted to work for KER, so I'm very lucky that I've been able to fulfil one of those goals in a nutritionist type role. So yeah, certainly very, very lucky from that point of view. Day to day, in terms of the role that I have at the moment, so it's pretty flexible. So we deal with every sort of horse owner. It can be from people with ponies, with weight problems, can be off-the-track network, can be racehorse trainers, can be breeders. Veterinarians is a big part of the role that we take care of, looking at clinical nutrition. So it is very varied, and one of the big things that I do is a lot of education. Still drawing back on that education experience and teaching experience in TAFEs and universities. So that's probably the biggest part of my role, to be honest.
But Aviator has been driven through along the fence. Aviator grabs a lead.
And you have a beautiful off-track thoroughbred, Aviator. He's by More Than Ready from Nude, so he's a half-brother to a champion 2-year-old and now stallion, Pride of Dubai. He was a stakes winner. He won over $100,000. How did you come to have this gorgeous horse?
So he actually came through a friend of mine. So he was trained by Mick Price, and Carolyn actually got in contact and said he might be a good option for me. So came across him a couple of years ago, and then I actually had a bad horse injury, so he sat in the paddock for 12 months before I could really get on him and do anything with him.
So what are some of the factors in feeding a horse who has just retired from racing? I mean, obviously their metabolism is still running at high speed, so they kind of churn through their feed without a lot of the goodness staying in them. What do you really need to look at, and focus on when you get a horse straight off the track? Yeah,
so I mean, probably your general health checks is probably the most important thing. So everything from dental, parasites, gut health is a big thing for off-the-track thoroughbreds. So getting that organised and checked out to know where you start from is probably the best option. Then from there, usually we always have fibre as the most important part of a ration. So it's very different for a horse that's come out of a training environment, that's been in a stable, predominantly probably on a more high grain ration than what a performance horse would be. Their digestive tract has adapted to utilising those nutrients, and they change the horse's microbiome, or bacteria in the horse's hindgut. So when horses first come off the track and they go through that transition period, their metabolism is working very, very fast, and it's set up to utilise the carbohydrates in the grains that are being fed. But when we actually want them to transition into a performance horse and we don't need that high energy intake all the time, it takes a little bit of time for their digestive tract to reset almost, and train those microbes, develop those microbes to break down fibre. A lot of the times, and one of the biggest questions and challenges that we come across is when we just turf a horse out into a paddock, because they don't necessarily eat a lot of pasture, and any pasture or hay that we give them, those microbes aren't well equipped to digest and extract calories from. So we need to give that time, and that's not something that happens overnight. There's no set timeline for that, but that's probably the biggest challenge that we come across, that we need to jump that hurdle before we can even look at giving them a different bucket of feed.
So it's not just that they're picky eaters, is it? I mean, they really do need a really, balanced approach to how you're going to feed this horse so that that condition doesn't drop off too dramatically.
Yeah. So because their metabolic rate is quite high, if we don't give them enough calories in those first few months after racing, they do drop more weight. So, combining that fibre along with a feed that we usually go with a high fat, high fibre content, but keeping in mind that they can be a little bit suspicious of new feeds. They're used to usually a sweet feed or a grain, so just giving them pellets is usually not the best option. Sometimes they experience a bit of neophobia, they experience not wanting to consume new foods. Putting some sweet feed is a really great trick into the mix. If you're not going to be feeding it long term, that is fine, but transitioning them slowly. And certainly introducing any new feeds over that sort of 7, 10, 14-day period is advisable anyway. One of the goals we have when we're trying to feed an off-the-track horse is obviously weight gain. So there's lots of different options that we've got available to us. So hay, loosened hay is going to be higher in energy than a grass hay. Then selecting an appropriate feed. So a sweet feed is a good option. The horse is likely to be used to eating that and is very, very yummy for them. Then you can go to a pellet or a cube if you like, and if you need to increase the energy density and the calories in the ration to encourage weight gain without making the meal sizes really, really large, then a stabilised rice bran like this one here is really useful in order to do that.
And a lot of, you touched on it before, a lot of race horses have ulcers and other problems in their gut. What should someone taking on a retired racehorse look for, and what treatments are the best for that?
Yeah, so certainly the gold standard is to get the horse scoped. Doing a gastroscope where you actually put a camera down into the horse's stomach is the best way to look and see what is actually going on. Otherwise, really, it's a guess, best guess. The stomach is divided into two parts, and the upper portion is where the majority of those ulcers do occur, but the ones that occur in the lower portion of the stomach, or the glandular portion, they can be quite a lot trickier to actually resolve. So knowing what you're dealing with allows you to then treat, usually with an omeprazole-based drug. There's lots of different brands available, and then you can use supplements and other things long term, but certainly gut health is, particularly ulcers, is one thing that nutrition does play a big role in. If you're trying to treat ulcers but you're still feeding a very high starch feed, or if the horse is fasting for a long period of time and not consuming adequate forage, you're on a bit of a mouse wheel. So certainly resolving that is important with nutrition as well in mind.
And water is another really big thing. I mean, horses are used to, in the racing stables, the water's pretty much constantly on tap. What do you advise people to make sure the horse is getting enough fluids?
Yeah, and this is probably one of the big questions that we do get, because when horses do, as you say, come out of a racing stable, they do usually have the small automatic waterers in their boxes. When we put them into a more relaxed equestrian or rehoming environment, they might go into a paddock with a different water source, and horses are very suspicious of new things, and water is one of them. If it smells different, if it tastes different, they're not likely to drink it well. So having that in a big water trough, it's difficult then to monitor individual intake, and that can be problematic. So reduced water intake can cause things like impaction colic or dehydration colic. So we do want to try to monitor that water intake as best we can when we take them to a new property or give them a new home. The other thing to consider is if you put them into a herd environment, which they may not have been in since they were sort of at stud. So once again, you can't monitor that individual horse's water intake. You don't know if they're drinking out of that dam, if they're being bullied and kept away from that water source or the feed source. So that's something to definitely consider, and seasonal variations. So during winter, particularly at the beginning of winter, it is there's a big high risk time where horses do have a spike in impaction colics. They prefer water somewhere between 7 and 20 degrees. So when it drops, they don't drink particularly well, and you can experience some impaction colics and things like that then as well.
And also with the herd environment, I mean, there is an issue. I've seen my rehomed ex-racehorses drop a lot of condition in a paddock with a pony or another breed because they guzzle all their feed. I mean, it really is important to make sure, even not so much even the bullying, they just eat faster sometimes.
Absolutely, and it really is a bit of a challenge. So our standard recommendation for any horse that you're trying to put weight on or that's got a special supplement or something in the feed is to remove them from that herd environment whilst you give them the hard feed at least. If you've got a situation where you don't have a lot of grass and you're relying on hay being fed out, then that's a little bit more challenging. Just make sure that you put more piles of hay or more feeders out than there is horses in the paddock. That's always a good trick. So if you've got 7 horses in the paddock, put out 8 or 9 feeders or 8 or 9 piles of hay, so at least they've got somewhere to try and go to. My go-to advice would be ask a reputable source for information. Certainly do your homework. It can be really tricky to plough through all of the marketing information available on websites or social media platforms. So having a conversation with someone so you can get actually individual advice is probably what I would recommend more than anything, and certainly what customers find most useful. We do virtual consultations as well, so we will use platforms like Zoom where we actually get a visual on the horse, we get a visual on the owner, their feed sources, their different types of hay, so we can be very specific in the advice that we provide.
They are an incredible breed, aren't they, the thoroughbred? It really is worth getting it right for the great joy and the athleticism and the fun you can have with these wonderful horses.
Absolutely, they're so versatile, and I think the off-the-track horses do have a wonderful life ahead of them when they finish racing. So I think setting them up well as soon as they're off the track, resolving any problems they may have had during racing, whether it's gut health, whether it's muscle issues, setting them up for success in jumping, dressage, whatever you want to do with them later in life.
There's always something new to know where thoroughbreds are concerned, and I hope Rebecca's experience has helped you with rehoming your horse. Coming up on Thoroughbreds Are Go, we hear from Chrissy Harris about the expansion of Thoroughbred Sport Horse Association.
This segment brought to you by Kingstar Farm. Time to Reign, new in 2021.
Chrissy Harris set up Thoroughbred Sport Horse Association several years ago to provide equestrian riders with competitions and great prize money to encourage the uptake of thoroughbreds in horse sport. And the result has been fantastic as TSHA continues to spread its wings across Australia, encouraging riders to give thoroughbreds a new life and be rewarded by some great sponsors from within the racing and breeding industry. Chris, it's fabulous to see Stonewall back and the events happening for thoroughbred riders and the horses themselves. Tell me what it's been like, because you've been waiting for so long through the COVID sort of lockdown to be back out competing.
Oh, it's really, the first show is actually quite scary because we've all done an amazing job riding and working our horses at home. And when you've got no competition, you seem to think that you're a little better than you are. So we all come out with great expectations, and then competition sorts us all out. So it's just lovely to be here.
And so many thoroughbreds and so many familiar names. I mean, Jeff Penzer and even Michelle, his wife, who's won a class too. It's really great to see, you know, Jess Ryan, Blake Ryan's wife, and so many others that are well known in the racing world that are here going on to the next step with these thoroughbreds.
Well, it's just one of the nicest things. You know, take Jeff and Michelle. Michelle actually won the class today riding Jeff's horse. So Jeff might not think it's going to be a 120, 130 horse. Michelle's really, really happy to take it and go the lower classes and win. So, you know, unlike racing, why the thoroughbred sport horse works and jumping works is that the professionals take them from the lower grades to the higher grades to teach them. And then once they get a little bit older and their joints aren't so great, then you can give them back to the amateurs and the juniors, and then they jump back to the lower grades again. So, you know, our competition horses have a great lifespan, and they can go from the little ring up to the main ring, back to the little ring. So first of all, you've got to keep all the rails up. And once you've kept them up, then the trick is to go faster than the next person. So jockeys like Jeff, they understand speed.
Very much so. And as far as your sponsors too, I mean, we have some new sponsors, Frank and Christine Cook. Their fence isn't quite ready yet, but it's really good to see, you know, Chris Waller, Gay Waterhouse, the Freedmans, Newcastle Jockey Club, Roderick Lodge, all those people within the racing and breeding industry are still here with thoroughbred sport horse.
It's just so lovely because they understand both sides. They understand the horses and the fact that you know, there is no key performance indicator or anything like that in what we're doing. All we're doing is trying to give horses a separate career so that people can look after them for the rest of their days. And these guys, they all have their heart on the sleeve and they help.
Well, it was a lovely round on Aviator. I mean, it's so hard, isn't it, coming out of COVID, coming into these competitions. Tell me about how you felt coming out here today.
I'm going to be honest, I felt a little underprepared with sales recently with Blake's business and COVID. It was sort of put on the back burner a little bit because we had the racehorses in work. But it was good to be back out, and he put his best foot forward and jumped a clear round for me. It felt like it got a little quick at some stages, but I was really happy with his effort.
And I remember that family, Dynamic Flyer and 3 Bianco Flyer, Bianco Lady, beautiful pedigree behind him, but also a link to your family.
So he is out of a marauding mare, and my dad actually used to ride marauding all his track work at Rose Hill, so it's a lovely little link. I didn't actually realise it until I went to register him with Thoroughbred Sport Horses Australia. So yeah, it was a really nice little link. My dad got very excited when I told him he was out of a marauding mare.
It's funny, isn't it? There are so many links really between the racing and breeding world and the equestrian world, and all this we see here today is really, I guess, trying to get people to take on thoroughbreds because they are just so great at what they're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, they're so smart, they're quick learners. I feel like they've got actually an amazing grounding in racing. They're broken in young, they do get time when they need time, but they go onto tracks, they're exposed to other horses, they go through tunnels, they go to the races, have to get tied up in stalls. So it is a really good grounding for them when they come out to shows and they have to stand at floats and things. And most of them take to it like duck to water. They really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm noticing, that you can actually maybe not ride them for a while and then, you know, within reason, get back on them, and they sort of pick up where they left off.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing in racing, like they're used to going out for long spells when they need a break and then being put back into work. So it's not out of routine for them to have a long break and then come back in. So for me, with the 2 kids, Aviator had a whole year off at one stage when I was pregnant, and then starting a new business, he had a little bit more time off because we were busy working. So I mean, I'm very lucky he's got a beautiful temperament, but I think most thoroughbreds do when given the time and the opportunity.
The plans going forwards, I mean, we know you have the National Championships coming up later on in 2022. Tell us a bit about the program going forwards, because you are, of course, now interstate, you have a number of competitions too, so you really are expanding.
Queensland and South Australia are going really, really well for us. And sneak preview, hopefully if we can get it done in time, Inglis are going to have a thoroughbred show at Warwick Farm. So that'll hopefully be happening just before the Australia Day races. in January. So it's a lot to gear up to get started, but Australian Turf Club have been amazing. You know, they're trying to help us with the infield. So between Australian Turf Club and Inglis, we really hope to get the show off the ground in January. Not in January, it might be a little later, but 100% all effort is going in to getting this new one done in January. So really looking forward to expanding, you know, to a couple of different areas around Sydney, and having thoroughbred only shows is going to be a real thing in the next couple of years.
I think they'll be surprised about how much the thoroughbred enjoys it and how relaxed they are. People think that sometimes they can be hyped up and a little fizzy, and you'll see these horses go out there, enjoy their work, relaxed and happy, and it's a great initiative by Inglis and the whole ATC to actually put it at a track. And I'm sure you'll see lots of nice horses there.
It's something we've looked at overseas and seen a lot of the well-known horses like Purple Moon with the retired racehorses over in the UK, and so many, they'll come out and they'll parade and do stuff. But overseas we've seen this with jumping competitions on a race day or leading into a race day. It's so important, isn't it? You know, it's lovely to see the old horses led around, but to see them actually doing something just creates so much interest, I think, for people in racing and for the equestrian people that are involved.
I love that whole idea of the cross-pollination between the racing people, not actually ever really letting go of their love for the thoroughbred. Sure, they love racing, but they've never let go of their love for the thoroughbred, and that's what happens when they transfer over to thoroughbred sport horses.
It's refreshing. It's nice not just to go to the races and see people in their work environment. It's nice to just go out, be able to enjoy yourself, and I think the horses really do enjoy themselves. So we're all here, we're all got each other's backs, and if anyone's ever worried or nervous or needs to walk a course with someone, we're all around each other to help each other out. We sponsor a couple of classes. We actually started last year when I started getting a bit more serious about my show jumping and getting a bit more time to do it as the kids got older. So Blake was more than happy to put his name forward and start sponsoring, and actually Chrissy in turn took a share in one of our racehorses this year, so that was really nice to know that it was the favour was repaid, and we've got a great relationship with Chrissy, and she's always there to lend an ear or an arena when we need one.
And also looking toward the national championships that Thoroughbred Sport Horse are looking at for next year. That's a big incentive for people to take on the breed.
Yeah, and you know what? It's going to be such a big show. There are so many different disciplines that are going to be put forward, so it's not just show jumping, and there's the end of year championships coming up, and there's thoroughbred classes there, and I mean Chrissy's done such an amazing job with Heath to get this place ready, so I'm looking forward to March next year. My horse is already in work now, so there's no rest for the wicked, and we look forward to next year.
The thing that I love about what we're doing is because you can, and as an entry point for show jumping, the cheapest way you can get into it at the moment is to buy a thoroughbred, and we've got classes for you. But those kids that do that, and they might be a little bit on struggle street and mum and dad might not have that much money, those kids are the ones that are going to transfer as workers to the thoroughbred industry. So I think hopefully the whole thing's going to go around in circles. So, you know, cheers to the racing industry. I think it's just what we're doing in conjunction with those guys, it's just really working. It's really starting to take off. So, and you know, people like you, without a bit of sponsorship and without recognition, it's basically because we've been on your show a couple of times that people ring up and go, hey, that's a great idea. You know, so thanks to Thoroughbreds Are Go.
Chrissy Harris and her team do a great job promoting thoroughbreds as a great horse for any rider, and I can't wait for the National Championships in 2022. Coming up on Thoroughbreds Are Go, a great tale about the love of a horse, or in this case, two horses, that extends away from the racetrack in Arrowfield Studs Strappers Stories.
Hi, my name's Alex and I'm a former strapper from Flemington. I'm here with iBoogie, formerly of Cameron Racing, and the lovely Galliando, formerly of Gay Waterhouse. I looked after both of these horses throughout their racing careers. They are both pretty well known for being big personalities, difficult horses, and honestly I'm not even sure what drew me to them in the first place, but bonded with both of them and was lucky enough that for Boogie's case, Scott Cameron sought permission from the owners, and they were happy for me to take him on when he retired. And for Gally, it was Anne and John McDonald actually sought me out, remembered me from when he was racing, and asked me if I'd like to have him when they retired him. As a former hurdler, Gally's being retrained as a show jumper, which he's absolutely loving. We've had a few competitions out and around the Mornington Peninsula. Boogie's still slowly coming off the track. Thanks, buddy. He's looking like he's going to make a nice all-rounder or a nice dressage horse, but they're both absolutely lovely animals. I'm very, very lucky that their ownership put in the effort to rehome them to me, and couldn't imagine my life without them.
A great story there, and you can see the passion so many people such as Alex in racing stables and studs across Australia have for their horses. That's it for this edition of Thoroughbreds Are Go. Coming up next week, we revisit the gorgeous Luna Rise, formerly Lenny and now Martin, as he moves from racing to show jumping and now a new career with the Mounted Police. That and much more next week on Thoroughbreds Are Go. I'm Caroline Searcy. I look forward to seeing you then.